The midday sun beat down on the shimmering turquoise waters, turning the endless expanse into a blinding mirror. On the deck of the merchant galleon, the Providence, Lady Eleanor adjusted the lace of her fine gown, the oppressive humidity a stark contrast to the cool stone halls of her English home. She was on her way to a new life, one chosen for her without her consent. Her father, Governor Harrington, had promised her hand to Lord Ainsworth, a man twice her age whose wealth and influence he craved. The thought of it was a bitter, leaden weight in her stomach. Suddenly, a cry from the crow's nest shattered the languid peace. "Pirates, starboard!" A cold dread coiled in Eleanor's chest as the crew scrambled, their panic a contagious fever. The ship that emerged from the haze was a lean, black-holed beast, its sails dark against the horizon. At its mast, a banner rose, a skull and two crossed cutlasses, the infamous mark of Elias Thorne, the sea serpent. A collective gasp went through the crew. His name was a ghost story whispered in every port, a legend of a man who took what he wanted and left destruction in his wake. Eleanor's heart pounded against her ribs. This wasn't a simple raid for cargo. Thorne's reputation was built on his brutal efficiency. A single, powerful cannon shot rocked the Providence, splintering the mainmast and sending sailors tumbling. The pirates' grappling hooks bit into the ship's railings, and with a terrible screech of wood and rope, the two vessels were locked in a deadly embrace. Captain Elias Thorne was not the monstrous figure of legend. He was a man of cold, hard-carved lines and a gaze as sharp as a cutlass. His dark hair was tied back, and a simple linen shirt open at the throat showed the lean, strong musculature of a man forged by the sea. He moved with a predatory grace, his boots thudding on the deck as he led his crew. He fought with a calculated precision, his sword a flash of silver and death. As the fighting raged, Eleanor was pushed by a frantic maid into a storage hold below deck. The air was thick with the scent of spices and fear. She found a small, iron-barred porthole and peered out, her knuckles white against the metal. From her vantage point, she saw him clearly. Elias Thorne, standing over a fallen sailor, his face a mask of detached concentration. He wasn't a brute fueled by bloodlust. He was an artist of war, and that was far more terrifying. A sudden, jarring thud above her head signaled the end. The battle was over. Footsteps clattered on the deck, and then a heavy thud as the hatch to the hold was thrown open. Eleanor stood her ground, her chin held high, the fear she felt transformed into a defiant resolve. She would not cower. "Bring the rest up," a gruff voice commanded. Then a new set of footsteps. Measured, deliberate, they stopped before her. She looked up, her gaze meeting the fathomless depths of Elias Thorne's eyes. He didn't look at her like a prize or a victim. He looked at her as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. "A noble lady," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "I confess, I didn't expect such a fine prize on a vessel so ill-equipped for a fight." "My father is Governor Harrington," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "He will pay any ransom you demand. Just name your price." A slow, wry smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ransom? My dear lady, your value to me lies not in coin, but in leverage. The governor is a man who deals in promises and treaties, and a daughter is a very strong promise indeed." You can't," she stammered, her defiance cracking. "You're a pirate. You take gold, not people." "A common misconception," he replied, leaning against the doorway with a casual air that felt anything but. "My crew and I, we have our own kind of justice, and your father owes a debt he doesn't even know he's incurred." He gestured to his crewmates, two burly men with scars and knowing grins. "Take her, bring her to the sea serpent, treat her with the respect due to her station." Eleanor's heart sank. She was no longer a passenger, but a captive. As they led her onto the deck of the pirate ship, the sun now setting in a fiery blaze, She looked back at the crippled Providence and the grim faces of her father's crew. She was alone in the heart of the enemy, and a storm far greater than any of the sea was brewing. Life aboard the Sea Serpent was a study in contrasts for Eleanor. The ship was not the squalid, filthy mess she had imagined. It was a well-oiled machine, its decks scrupulously clean, its rigging expertly maintained. Yet the crew were a motley group of hardened men and women, their faces etched with the brutal realities of their lives. She was given a small but private cabin, a stark, functional space that had once belonged to the ship's quartermaster. Elias Thorne did not treat her like a prisoner. He gave her no formal orders, and she was free to walk the deck, always under the watchful eye of a silent crewmate. He would often find her by the railing, staring out at the endless waves. "I see you're not one for confinement," he said one evening, his voice startling her from her reverie. "I am not a caged bird, Captain Thorne," she retorted, turning to face him. "And you cannot keep me here forever." "Perhaps not," he mused, a flicker of something she couldn't place in his eyes. "But I have no intention of caging you. My fight is with your father, not with you." Eleanor scoffed. "My father is a man of the crown. He has done nothing to you." "Has he not?" A shadow crossed his face. "My village on the island of Tortuga was a peaceful place. We traded, we fished, we lived. Your father's men came under the banner of the crown and claimed our land. They burned our homes, stole our livelihoods. My family, they were a part of the unwanted population, cleared for English settlement. He calls it progress. We call it theft and murder." Eleanor's defiance faltered. She had never considered the human cost of her father's colonial ambitions. All she had known were the grand balls, the political alliances, the sanitized stories of the Crown's noble mission. This was a truth that was raw and bitter. I am so sorry," she said, the words feeling utterly inadequate. Thorne shook his head, a wry bitterness in his smile. "Don't be. Your apologies mean nothing to the ghosts of my past. But you see now, my lady, why a man would become a pirate. Not for gold, but for vengeance. Not for a flag, but for a memory." Over the next few days, their forced proximity bred a fragile understanding. Eleanor saw the weight he carried. He was not a senseless villain, but a man burdened by his past, fighting to rebuild what was lost. She saw him tending to a young crewmate's wound, the gentleness in his hands a stark contrast to his fearsome reputation. She watched him chart the stars with a knowledge that surpassed any academic she had ever met. He was a paradox, a ruthless captain who ruled with respect, a man of violence who craved justice. One evening, a fierce storm descended upon them. The waves rose like mountains, crashing over the deck, and the wind howled like a banshee. Eleanor was thrown from her bunk and stumbled into the main cabin, her hands outstretched for balance. The Sea Serpent creaked and groaned, fighting against the fury of the sea. Elias Thorne was there, a lantern casting dancing shadows across his face as he studied a chart, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he saw her, his usual impassive demeanor cracked. "You should be in your cabin. It's safer there." "I don't care," she shouted over the wind's roar. "I'm not a child to be told where to hide. What is happening?" He hesitated, then sighed, a rare display of vulnerability. "We're caught in a squall, and we're too close to the reefs of the Serpent's Teeth. I'm trying to navigate us through without tearing the hull to pieces." A massive wave slammed into the side of the ship, sending them both sprawling. Eleanor cried out as she was thrown against a wall, a sharp pain shooting through her arm. Thorne was on her in an instant, his hands on her shoulders, his gaze scanning her for injury. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "My arm," she whispered, her breath catching in her throat as his touch sent a jolt through her. He gently rolled up her sleeve, his fingers surprisingly delicate as he felt for a break. "It's not broken," he confirmed, his relief palpable. "Just bruised." He met her eyes, and in that moment, the carefully constructed walls between them crumbled. The air was charged with something electric, a tension that had been building since their first encounter. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, a different kind of tempest was just beginning. "Eleanor," he breathed, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I can't resist you any longer." He didn't ask. He simply lowered his head and kissed her. It was not the gentle, chaste kiss she had read about in novels. It was a kiss of raw, desperate longing, of years of a hardened heart finally finding a release. It was the kiss of a man who had forgotten what it was to feel, and a woman who had never truly lived. In that single stolen moment, the pirate captain and the noble lady were simply two people lost at sea, finding an anchor in each other. The storm passed, leaving a fragile, tense silence. The kiss had changed everything, an unspoken truth that hovered between Eleanor and Elias. Her admiration for his strength and honor eclipsed her fear, and he in turn softened, a warmth in his eyes reserved only for her. Their fragile understanding was tested when a Royal Navy warship, the Leviathan, appeared. "Your father's flagship," Elias said, his jaw tight. "He's coming to sink us." He gave orders to prepare for battle. As the crew raced to their stations, Eleanor, without thinking, helped a young, terrified cabin boy. Elias watched, a flicker of pride and pain in his eyes. The battle was brutal, a deafening roar of cannons. Elias commanded his ship masterfully, but the Leviathan was bigger. A cannonball struck the mainmast, and a large piece of wood flew toward Elias. "Elias, look out!" Eleanor screamed. He turned, but not in time. The timber slammed into his side, and he crumpled to the deck. Eleanor was there first, her hands on his bleeding wound. "Elias, stay with me," she pleaded, pressing a cloth to it. He looked at her, his vision blurring, and a weak smile touched his lips. "I told you. I couldn't resist you." Eleanor looked at the approaching warship and at the man she loved. A fierce resolve hardened her features. "Silas," she said to the quartermaster, her voice clear and strong, "you will surrender. Tell my father I am unharmed and that I demand to speak with him. And tell him that if he harms a single person on this ship, I will choose to be a pirate's wife. But I will not be a pawn in his games." Hours later, on the deck of the Leviathan, Governor Harrington's face was a mixture of rage and relief. Eleanor, her gown torn, stood before him, her head held high. Behind her, Elias and his crew were led away in chains. "They have saved me, father," she said, her voice shaking with a cold fury. "They have shown me the truth of your world and the honor in theirs. You are nothing but a thief." His face paled, not at her words, but at the conviction in her eyes. "What is your price, daughter?" he asked, his voice a low, pained whisper. "The freedom of Captain Thorne and his crew," she said, her gaze firm. "A treaty between your colony and the free ports. Let them have peace, and you will not touch him. If you do, I will walk out of your life forever." The governor looked at the man who had stolen his daughter's heart. He knew she was serious. He nodded slowly. "It will be done." Weeks later, a treaty was signed. Eleanor, now a woman of her own making, stood by Elias as he signed the document. His crew, free and jubilant, cheered. The sea serpent was no longer a symbol of war, but of hard-won peace. Eleanor had traded her title for a new life, a home, and a love she had never dreamed of. She had chosen freedom over a golden cage. Elias stood with her on his ship's deck, the evening sun casting a golden light on their faces. "You risked everything for me," he said, his voice full of awe. She smiled. "And you, my love, you gave me a world I never knew I wanted." He leaned in, his lips brushing hers. "I always knew I couldn't resist you, my lady, from the very moment I saw you."